I don't know how I'm still here. I got to a point where I just thought that I wasn't really good enough to be around any longer. And I couldn't see any good that I could bring to this world. I kind of despised the way that I missed time with my kids, the excuses I would make not to hang out with family. So I went away to a facility called White River Manor, which is effectively a mental health addiction retreat, 5-star lodge, only 10 little cottages with 10 clients from around the world. I was there for a month, away from the distractions and the pressures of my outside life. It made me kind of reevaluate what was important to me and how I needed to get out of there. There is a huge amount of people that have reached out to me in terms of the stresses that they're facing, the problems that they're facing, whether it be from a substance, alcohol, whether it's mental health, being overburdened at work or in family life, and dealing with the constant pressure. I know for a fact I can't avoid going to bars and events, but I'm going to be straight up with everybody and just say, listen, I'm sober. I don't drink. I don't mind if you have a drink, but I just want to put it out there. And it's been received incredibly well. The support from people has been fantastic. I think you go to somebody that you trust and that you respect and that will treat you with respect too. And any one of us has, somebody like that in our life, and just say, these are the thoughts that I'm having. These are the issues that I'm facing. I just need to share it with somebody.
Welcome to the iGaming Leader podcast, where we uncover the human side of some of the most inspirational leaders in our industry. I'm your host, Leo Judkins, and as an ex-iGaming director turned performance coach, I've worked with over 200 leaders from companies like Entain, 365, Flutter, and many more to help them build the habits to achieve sustainable high performance. In these episodes, we share exactly what it takes for you to achieve the same. So with that being said, let's dive in. Hey everybody, welcome to the iGaming Leader. I am joined here today by Mark Schmidt, who is the MD for EveryMatrix, been in the industry for 17 years. And Mark, really excited to talk to you today.
Hey Leo, thanks for having me. All good. Really, really happy to be joining you today. Obviously, we've had quite a bit of communication over the last few months, and I've been following what you've been doing with, iGaming Leader and hearing the feedback from relevant leaders in the industry and people across the board. Super excited to kind of share my journey, which is slightly different to some, but also to kind of just be on this platform and be associated with some of the, amazing people that you've had in the past. So thanks for having me.
It's been so good talking to you again. Just, you've shared quite a bit on different podcasts, but for anybody that doesn't know you, would you mind kind of talking a little bit about your journey in the industry over the last 16, 17 years? And
Sure. So I kind of stumbled into the industry by chance, really. But looking back at it, it was destiny in a way, in that I went to school with Owen Heffer's son, Owen Heffer is the founder and owner of Hollywood Bets, South Africa's biggest, B2C brand. Sponsored Brentford in the Premier League, huge brand, massive business. And started working for Owen in the Hollywood team and moved into the trading office at Hollywood Bets. So that office was basically a group of mates from school. We partied hard, worked relatively hard, but it was a trial and error kind of process, where we learned that making mistakes cost real money, but we learned very quickly how to fix those mistakes. But absolutely amazing bunch of guys, and very fortunate today that not only did I go to school with most of these guys, but we've also continued our careers in the B2B world. So when we go across to different gaming shows, events, etc., we all kind of stay in touch, and it's a really nice little community that we've kept, and we use that community to kind of share ideas and ask for advice. And even though we competitors in many senses, that there's that open communication and helping out, which is huge for me. So after Hollywood, I was there for about 4 or 5 years, I think. I got approached by Sportradar, and then I joined Greg Parsons. Greg had a huge impact in my career, taught me the commercial side of the gaming space. And Greg and I went into Africa and basically, started selling the Sportradar and BetRadar feeds across Africa. At one stage, I think it's difficult to put a number on it, but I think there were close to over 100 different partners within Africa that we signed up in that, 4 or 5 year period. So huge amount of respect for Greg, but learned from the ground up, going out to parts of Africa that I never even thought I would visit or be associated with, learning about different cultures, how a deal's done, specific to each country, learning to be patient, which has always been a big problem for myself. But yeah, you learn to what's expected and what's not expected. And it was an amazing experience with Greg, and, amazing mentor for me in my career. So I left Sportradar because I was approached by IMG, and that for me was kind of going from Sportradar, which I thought was this, absolutely amazing, massive company, but going into IMG where they basically touched every part of sports, licensing, rights holders, broadcasting, etc. And IMG had started up IMG Arena, which has just been acquired by Sportradar, and headed up their operations and sales and commercial efforts for Africa and the Middle East. So the growth of that business was really something that took me by surprise. It seemed like month on month there was something new that was dropping in. But it reached a point with IMG where I realized that I'd kind of hit my ability to penetrate the market in various respects. I'd gone to all the tier ones that could afford the services, the tier twos, etc. And it became quite difficult to move on and, kind of push what I needed to. And then I was approached by ProNet Gaming, call it slash Sporting Tech, and they were looking to get into Africa, which was something that really excited me. So they had a platform that had been really strong within the grey markets. So I helped a guy called Tommy Malloy, who's the chief product officer, great guy in the industry too. Became a very good friend and kind of worked very closely with Tommy to build out the African product from a platform, unification, etc. And that was a steep learning curve. And then I stayed with Sporting Tech again for another 4 or 5 years. Towards the end of my time with Sporting Tech, I kind of hit a bit of a serious wobble. My mental health is something that I had struggled with for, my whole adult life, and even into parts of high school, where it was something that I had always taken medication for it, but it was feel like I was getting better and then, drop off it and then not continue it. So it was always kind of these continuous hurdles that I was facing, every 6, 7, 8 months or so. But with Sporting Tech, they reached a point where the management at the time, there was a lot, the employees were a bit disillusioned about what was going on. There were tech issues at the time. They had very big clients within Brazil that needed a lot of requirements, but then also meant that we couldn't onboard new clients in other territories. So, as a sales commercial person, I was feeling that pressure, I've got to bring a business, but then you're also hamstrung by what the business can do. And I kind of spiraled out of control very quickly where, I was going out every night. I'd never been somebody that would drink, I would say, every day. But then it came to the point where I would have a drink. I'd say, okay, it's 4 p.m. Let me have a drink at my desk. A beer would turn into 10 beers or, would turn into the hard stuff quite quickly. And then as the time went on, those drinks would be happening earlier in the day too. And initially, I suppose for me, I didn't think it really was a problem because I was still able to be a dad, be a husband, in my mind at least. And I was around for, bedtime, bath time, etc. Although I was there in body, I wasn't there in mind. I had like all these demons going on, and I felt so much guilt in terms of the way I was dealing with things that I didn't share it with anyone. I reached a point where things just got progressively worse. And if I look back at now, I kind of balanced on the edge for a very long time. And then what effectively tipped me over was I went through to Mexico to do a deal with a massive operator there. And I ended up staying for a week, and I spent, I think it was 3 or 4 days in San Diego by myself. And what I did was just kind of drink my way through that period that I was there. I remember waking up in the one morning and my hotel room was just, covered with bottles, and I was like, this has got to change. And I actually decided then to get sober. So this last Monday was 1 year sober for me. But even though I decided to get sober, I still had these mental challenges, in terms of depression. The anxiety was getting like crippling for me too. And as I'd lost that, I think looking back at it now, as I'd lost that kind of outlet in terms of alcohol to kind of take away the so-called edge that I was, that I had, I just kind of spiraled more and more out of control in terms of these thoughts where there's no doubt that I don't know how I'm still here. I got to a point where I just thought that I wasn't really good enough to be around any longer. I hated myself, if I'm completely honest. And I couldn't see any good that I could bring to this world. I kind of despised the way that I missed time with my kids, the excuses I would make not to hang out with family. My career obviously was at the stage of Sporting Tech where they're incredibly kind and understanding with me. And we became very good friends, with myself and the new management that came in. And that's something I'll always be incredibly grateful for. A guy like Tom Euston, Colin McDonough, Jack Smith at Sporting Tech, absolute legends, just all around good people. And they were hung in there with me to help me. But I was telling them one thing, like, yeah, I'm okay. Yeah, I'll get through this. And it got to a point where the one day I kind of just been thinking about it. And I decided that, this is it. Like, the time's now for me to go. And I planned how I was going to do it. It's still something that I haven't really dealt with, I think, entirety. There's a lot of shame still from my side around that. But, I've got three beautiful daughters. I kissed my girls goodbye. I went out. I kissed my wife goodbye. And I had this whole plan of how I was going to do it. And it felt almost surreal in a way, because I had such clarity in terms of, I felt almost at peace in terms of what I was going to do, because it had been on my mind for so long. But then a few things kind of fell in place to kind of stop that from happening. And then I got home and, I just kind of melted down, is the only way I can really put it. And, like, all that weight kind of dropped off me, and my wife knew something was up. She obviously knew something was up thereafter, before that. And I just kind of broke down into it. If I look at how I'm still here today, it's, I'd say, 90% down to her and the support that she's shown me throughout. She was very hard on me in terms of getting the recovery that I needed, and the support that I needed. And she basically had to run the household while this was all going on, and while I went away to kind of get my mind right and back to where I needed to be. But she showed me absolute love throughout. In terms of somebody that sets an example to what it means to be a parent, a leader, and somebody who loves it, for me, she's absolutely amazing. So yeah, I kind of had this period after the sporting tech. They were very kind of very understanding, absolutely amazing in the process. Everyone in the company, I left there on good terms, and basically got to a point where I knew I couldn't work and continue to do what I needed to do. And I explained it that I'd spoken to my therapist, and I needed to get away and just have a break from the industry and get my mind right. And they granted me that, and we separated on good terms, with always understanding if I wanted to come back, I could if I wanted to. But I always knew that I think I needed something new, something fresh to start again, to kind of, a clean break and move on with new ways of how I wanted to live my life. So I went away to a facility called White River Manor, which is effectively a mental health addiction retreat. Absolutely amazing place up in just outside the Kruger in South Africa. 5-star lodge, only 10 little cottages with 10 clients from around the world. I was there for a month, and I could tell that the change that I made in that month, it seemed absolutely huge to me at the time. But all it really did was kind of give me a break away from the distractions and the pressures of my outside life. And it made me kind of reevaluate what was important to me and how I needed to get out of there. And, a month in terms of recovery is still very, very new and young. This stage now, being a dad and being completely honest with myself about what I needed to do to continue supporting my family and learning to accept myself and love myself again, was a huge part of it too. So yeah, it's a bit of a story past. For a long time, there were a select few within the industry that kind of knew my story. These people were all very close to me, but there were a lot that obviously didn't know and had no idea. And when they would see me going out drinking or whatever, I was always known as the guy who would stay till the very end and always be up for a good time and good for a party. And yeah, so it's interesting when people now saying like, well, I didn't really expect that. I've known you for 10 years or so. And a lot of people have come forward and kind of said, look, I've had the same issues too. And I think from that, people are very, very good at hiding exactly what's going on and displaying what they want the world to see. So yeah, in a nutshell, that's basically how I got here now.
Wow, Mark, thank you for sharing that. It's it's such a journey you've been on, and I'm really proud of you for sharing all of it so openly, and especially after, like you said, there were only very few people that knew about it, and some of these things people that probably haven't even heard about. Amazing story. So I'm really glad that you're sharing it, Mark, because as we've spoken about before, one of the big things is that in different kind of, severity levels, many people experience these things, right? In different ways. But I'd like to talk a little bit about that feeling of being by yourself and having like that you're the only one, and that our generation where we've got to man up and we've got to fix it ourselves because we're tough guys. Can you talk to me a little bit about that and how that showed up, and what's changed and how that's benefited you?
I think that the big thing is control. You can also use the term imposter syndrome. And for a lot of my career, there's a part of it where if I look back at it now, clearly, like I've progressed through my career and through life quite quickly. You know, I've hit the goals that I've had to achieve. But when I got there, I've always felt like, am I actually good enough to do this? Like, you know, have they made a mistake? Am I the right person? But in all honesty, I've always found a way to get it done, whether it's the right way or the wrong way. But, you know, having that control to manage everything becomes all encompassing. So I would always have to, if I go into position, the team around me, I would have to check to see, also, I suppose, micromanage people too, which is not great for anyone working with me at the time, but check and see what was going on. So I could see that was done to the right way. And so I could kind of tell myself, all right, it's been done. It's okay, and keep going. But it's a very lonely place to be there, right? And because when you're in that position, it becomes very hard to ask for help, especially when you kind of have to have your finger on the pulse of everything else that's going on. So, you know, I spoke about my wife early on, and she runs her own business. She runs a very successful photography business that she runs, where she can shoot weddings around the world and, you know, big clients that are here in South Africa and abroad. And her pressures are very different to my pressures. And one thing that I've never been very good at is communicating the pressures that I was feeling. So I would just say, no, look, you don't understand. You don't know what it's like. And then I would kind of isolate myself away and just kind of go out with people and leave her at home with the kids, which, you know, it's incredibly sad to think what's happened, but I'm also happy that I'm able to acknowledge and see that this can't happen again. But that time away was like being out and having a drink and, you know, not being there to face everything else that was going on. Then I would have to get in a taxi back home, and I would have to think about what I'd done, what I was facing, and what I had to do the next day. So I'd wake up hungover. I would be terrible to be around. I would be unreasonable in other parts. I would know that I was being unreasonable, and that kind of, those feelings just become, you know, more and more, like they just compound over time in terms of the way I treat people and the way I'd feel about myself too. So going back to the imposter syndrome side of things, is that I've always wanted to impress, and I've always wanted to feel the need to be people to be impressed with what I'm putting forward. But that pressure, sometimes it just can't work. And, you know, that pressure that you put on yourself, or I put on myself, was, you know, in sales, it's all about reaching your budget and hitting your numbers. And you hit those numbers and cool. Then you move on to the next thing. Then you move on to the next thing. And it's just a never ending cycle of what's going on. And being alone was difficult during the time. I had an amazing wife to support me through it. And I saw you posted about being away on holiday with your family. Yeah. And those thoughts that you have, and absolutely being able to disconnect from work and actual family time. In all honesty, I don't think up until, you know, the last few months in my professional career, or since being a dad, you know, 8 years ago, I've been able to have that disconnect where I'm just like, okay, I'm off. I'm focused on my family. They're also really important. And at the end of the day, your family are the reason why you're working, right? For nearly all of us, you know? So if you can't look after them, what is the point in look after yourself? So yeah, it becomes a very lonely place. And also with the salesperson, you know, you're on the road a lot. There's a hell of a lot of time when you're by yourself. And those times by yourself, that's when reality really kicks in. It's very hard to, you know, to kind of, for me, it became very hard to accept who you are to become.
That's so true, isn't it? And I was talking to one of my executive coaching clients earlier about how one of the hard things in business development, right, and sales, is that a lot of these deals are made at 3 a.m, you know, in some shady place where we don't want to be seen. And I think it's that is very typical in gaming, right? It's very typical around conferences. So when you have a certain inclination and like you're in that environment, that makes it very easy to slip, right? And how would you advise people to deal with that? People that perhaps feel that the way that they've been dealing with things with alcohol or with their personal lives, that they feel that that's no longer sustainable. They want to make a change, but they don't quite know how to, because this is the way they've always done it. And they're afraid that if they change things, everything might be lost.
Sure. I can speak from my experience, right? And I have these exact thoughts, and I had it for so long in terms of what I was actually thinking to the outside world, that, you know, everybody thought that amazing family, amazing job, everything looked great. So the proper Instagram lifestyle, right? But you just take a peek behind the curtains, it's very, very different. And I was always nervous for people to actually see what was behind those curtains. But what I've absolutely seen is that speaking up. There's so many people in the same position as what I was. And I'm not saying everyone, but there is a huge amount of people that have reached out to me in terms of the stresses that they're facing, the problems that they're facing, whether it be from a substance, alcohol, whether it's mental health, being overburdened at work or in family life, and dealing with the constant pressure. If you do the same thing continuously, I know it's very cliche, there's no change is ever going to come. You might get a change for a couple of days or a week, but you're not going to have long lasting change. And you can't expect to change absolutely everything overnight. Like any good thing, it takes time to build. And for me, one of the biggest worries I had about getting back into the industry and, being sober and everything else was the exact thing you made around about where deals are done and how I'm going to deal with that. And I said to my wife, look, I'm just going to be straight up about it with the people. Like, I know for a fact I can't avoid going to bars and events, but I'm going to be, straight up with everybody and just say, listen, I'm sober. I don't drink. I don't mind if you have a drink, but I just want to put it out there. And it's been received incredibly well. The support from people has been fantastic. I also know that there's limitations in terms of what I can and can't do. So going out for a dinner with drinks, etc. I know that I need to kind of say look, guys, I'm out of here at 10 or whatever it may be, which does the job and kind of lay down those boundaries. But also very fortunate enough that I've built an incredible network over the years that a lot of these guys that are in the network that I have trust me. I trust them. We've done repeat business over the years based on that trust that we have. I think it would be quite different now for me if I was just entering the industry now and not really having the network that I do have. Yeah, it's about boundaries and, knowing what you are there for and what you want to achieve, and in terms of what I might say on social media and LinkedIn and be outspoken. I speak my mind and I speak what I believe. And the point with that is that I think speaking up about what I'm going through also provides safety for myself. So people know my story. So in one sense, very selfish, but also in another sense, I know that it offers kind of a lifeline for somebody else that might be going through the same thing. And the first time I did it, where I came clean to the industry, I was taken back by the messages that I got, from DMs from people. And I'm no therapist, but I've got a bit of a background in how to really stuff things up. And I was able to listen and provide a supportive ear and just say, look, well done for reaching out. Things can get better and they will get better if you do take it seriously and you want to do change. And this is what's worked for me, but I suggest that you speak to a professional and, just be open with those people around you. And it's been great to see that kind of move forward and progress into different parts of the industry. And one of the things that I'm looking to set up now is kind of a support group for iGaming people that are going through these challenges, whether it's drink or mental health. And I suppose I spoke about it, I think it was on the Gambling Files website with Finton and John, where, you look at the pressures of us, for example, SBC, Lisbon, or any of these big shows around the world and the expectations that you have there. For people that are sober or battling through these parts, it would just be nice to have a kind of a group of people that are in the industry that we know for sure that are going through these problems, that can just be there to say hey guys, I'm struggling. Can anyone meet up for a coffee before the show starts this morning? Or, anyone free this night for a dinner and then, early night or whatever it may be. And I think that just kind of, the more people that we can reach out to and help and avoid a situation that nearly happened to me, I think for me, that would mean, it would be successful if we can just help one person going forward. So
you're already doing it, Marka. You're already doing it by just talking about it. And I think, because that's the key, right? The key is for people to go, no, that's exactly what I'm feeling. That's exactly what I'm going through. And it might not be, like I said earlier, it might not be to the same level, but the thoughts and feelings and behaviors on some sort of scale might be very similar. And very often the problem is that we feel we're alone, and just being able to recognize that you're not the only one and that it's okay to talk about. But I want to touch on something that you said, which I think is really important here. All of this comes from fear, right? Fear, as in imposter syndrome, is fear of being found out. And then you're micromanaging because you're fearful that somebody's going to see that you shouldn't actually be in that position. And you're working harder than everybody else just to prove that you do belong there. But also fear of change is often a reason why people go to the brink, let it get really, really bad, because they feel that they perhaps are a certain character. They're the entertainment of the night. And if they would change, if they would stop drinking completely, for example, who's left, and how would people perceive that? And so that's why often that fear of, okay, I'm going to be seen differently, is why people let it escalate all the way to serious breakdown. And obviously we want to help people not get there and help people create behavior change well before that. Hey, if you're a VP, a director, founder, or executive in iGaming, and you want to achieve sustainable high performance without sacrificing your personal life or your well-being, then the iGaming Leader Mastermind might be your kind of thing. It is a highly vetted community in which we work together with other iGaming leaders in the industry to achieve that sustainable high performance. Because leadership in iGaming can be really lonely and isolating. But when you've got the right people around you, it can make such a difference to your performance, your productivity, and your personal life. So if that's something you want to know a little bit more about, head over to igamingleader.com and apply to join. So how do you see that from the people that have reached out to you, Mark, from you telling your story and people going, wow, that's I'm struggling with that as well. Are those some of the things that you see coming up as well? And if so, what are some of the things people are doing and perhaps working for them?
What I've seen is that it's across the board, from C-level execs, some people that I never even thought I would be in communication with, to sales manager, to people that own product. It's across the board. And there's certain generations, I think, that understand what needs to be done. And I suppose in terms of approaching the need to ask for help and being really fearless in terms of adversity and putting things out there and being accepting to change, etc., and looking at ways to better themselves. But if I look at my generation and older, we've grown up with kind of, you just get it done. You don't ask for help, and you power through it, and the white knuckling and all of that, and you don't show fear, and you don't show that anything's really bothering you. And there's only so many amount of time that you can keep doing that before it kind of runs out, and you get to a point, like you said, where you've actually got no runway left anymore. You are absolutely done. And from a South African perspective, males here are still very much like you just kind of bash through it and you get it done, and you don't really ask for help. I always had the help. I always had it there, but I also felt that if I had to ask for help, I would be seen differently, and I'd be seen almost as weaker than I wanted to be seen as. So that was a fear, I suppose, from my side. But the biggest fear I have now is that I know that there are friends of mine within the industry that are still kind of grappling with the same things that I grappled with over the years. And it might get to the point where it's too late for them, which is obviously really scary for me too. And I can see it happening, and like, I just want to say that if I'm able to get to a better point where I'm now, and I know there's a lot of work that still needs to be done, I know that anyone can do it, because for me, there was really no way out in my mind. That's proper fear when you just look around you and you've got the beautiful house, you've got the beautiful kids, beautiful wife, great job, but you just can't see a way of ever finding happiness or being accepted again. And I was in that place. I managed to somehow get out, and it's been bloody hard, don't get me wrong, but there is always a way to get through it. And I think removing that part of that fear and that thought process for people, for me, just to understand that and maybe just kind of think about it for more than a couple of seconds, if that can help a handful of people, then that's, for me, that would just be amazing.
The advice I would always give people is just get help, just get someone to help. And that doesn't necessarily have to be a therapist, can be a friend, can be whatever. It doesn't really matter, but get some help, because when you're stuck in your own head, like I had exactly the same thing. I was drinking every night, and I didn't know how to give that up, because I thought going out all the time, and I thought, okay, if I'm going to give that up, then what do I have left? What I have left in life, and how it's just work. Or if I stop working earlier and try to switch off, like, they're going to find me out and that I don't belong here, right? And you're not going to solve it in your own head. That's the biggest difficulty that people don't see, is that, okay, if you don't see a way out, you're stuck in your own bottle, right? And so, of course, you can't read the label. Brain surgeon's not going to operate on their own head either. It's not really going to work. So I think just getting an outside view is such a game changer. When was the first time that happened for you, Mark? I'd love to hear that.
I would say I was about 24, 25. I had a really bad experience with the therapist at the time. Then the advice given was really not helpful to me in any way. And I think it was more along the lines of tough love than support. And I left feeling like, why did I put myself through this? I say the last year or so, I'd been seeing a therapist here in my local town who had been good and kind of settled me down in terms of like made me kind of reevaluate what I was thinking and slowed me down to a point where I could start kind of thinking things through without making these snapshot decisions. The real change for me was seeing a guy I called Michael Ferron, who specialized, he's an addiction specialist. And so he could see straight through everything that I was saying to him. There was no ways I could trick him into anything. He saw it straight away, and he called a spade. And I've got an incredibly frank and open relationship with him, and I see him very often. With him, he puts in very kind of lifelike mechanisms to help me kind of get over these hurdles. We talk about what I'm facing, what is real pressure, what isn't real pressure. Sometimes I'm convincing myself that this really needs to get done when actually it doesn't need to be. And, also convincing myself that in order to be kind of a good employee, I need to be busy the whole time. And, what is busy? Is it productive? Is it actually giving value? Or is it just kind of filling your diary up with back-to-back meetings all day to produce something? So a lot of those kind of thought processes and like the thoughts that I'd had before all kind of changed in a lot of respects. And it's been incredibly freeing to me in terms of how I structure my day, structure my week. There's still certain things that I get right for a period of time, and then I kind of fall back on. And then when things are kind of going haywire again, he will say to me, okay, but you're not doing the following like we agreed. And I'm like, oh, okay, cool. Like we get it, and we make the change. So it's been good. I used to dread the drive. It's about an hour drive into his practice, and I used to hate having to drive there because I knew that I was going to be absolutely grilled by, have you done this? Have you done that? But it's actually got to the point now where I wouldn't say I enjoy the sessions, but in a weird way I do, because it's challenging, and I'm left with a kind of new way to think about life and approach things differently. And, I can also challenge him on what he says to me, which is great.
That's one of the big things, Mark, right? Is that we have this tendency to just kind of lie to ourselves, and we know we're doing it, but and then we're great at lying to everybody else about it as well. And sometimes you start having these questions, which are really normal questions, like, do I actually have a problem or not? And none of these things, in my mind anyway, are binary. It's never a yes or no. It's actually when it shows up as an issue in your life and you're feeling that this is the thing that you're doing is not sustainable, then you've got an issue. How you label that issue doesn't really matter, but it's an issue that you need addressing, right? And I think the best thing you can do is actually having someone like you're talking about now, somebody that puts a mirror in front of you and sees through the bullshit and actually, calls a spade and goes, well, that's not necessarily true. It's uncomfortable, but none of our growth happens inside of our comfort zone, right? So just my last question, Mark, really is, for anybody that finds themselves in these thoughts as well of not knowing how to get out, feeling that the things that they are doing is just not a lifestyle that they want to keep on living, but they're fearful of creating those changes and what people might think, what's the very first step that they could take? Easy, simple, quick thing that they could do.
I think you go to somebody that you trust and that you respect, and that will treat you with respect too. And any one of us has, somebody like that in our life, and just say, these are the thoughts that I'm having. These are the issues that I'm facing. I just need to share it with somebody. It doesn't have to be a big speech. It can just say from my side, I'm not sure what to do. For me, as you said earlier, speaking to a professional and reaching out to somebody who actually can assist you is the best way to do it. But for keeping it in, it's just never going to solve anything. And you're never going to be able to do it yourself. So the world's changed a hell of a lot. There are so many different ways that you can get help now. You can get through it in various ways. There's so many different ways you can get help. And again, the thing that I just kind of remember is that there's always a way out. There's always a way to get better. There's always a way to get through what you're doing. And I know some people might be thinking like, oh, it's easier said than done, but like I said earlier, if I was able to do it, trust me, you can definitely do it too. From my side, again, I'm not a therapist, I'm not there to help, but if somebody just wants to reach out and say, I want to chat, it stays confidentially between the two of us. And I'm not going to be able to tell you how to fix your life, but I can just be a friend or, somebody in support to help. But biggest thing, don't keep it in. There's a lot of people to go out that will be there, that will be willing to help you more than you will ever really believe.
Love it, Mark. And don't wait for the right time. It's the last one I'll add to it, because the right time will actually never happen.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, the right time, there is a right time, which was yesterday was the best time. The time after that was today. So, all right, Mark. Hey, thanks a lot, mate. Really, really appreciate you sharing and opening up. And you're such a great example for so many people in the industry that struggle with these thoughts and feelings and behaviors. And today you've given them a great way to actually start tackling some of those. So, again, if anybody's struggling or feeling that they're stuck with any of the things that Mark spoke about, please reach out to him. Lots of experience in this area, and happy to have a confidential conversation. So thanks again, Mark.
Yeah, pleasure, Leo, and thanks for having me, and thanks very much for having this platform for people to speak up about the real human side of the industry.
Thank you for joining me on the iGaming Leader podcast. If you enjoyed today's episode, head over to igamingleader.com for more conversations and insights. Don't forget to subscribe to this podcast. I'm your host, Leo Judkins, and I hope to see you next week.